Hi there, and welcome to the Homestead Education Podcast. Do you have a homestead, farm, or just dream of a rural life? This is a show to help you and your kids grow your own food and grow as a person. I'm your host, Kody Hanner. I'm a homesteader, homeschool mom of six, and small town enthusiast. I was raised by an old school rancher and blessed by the grace of God to have been exposed to so much of what rural life has to offer. Join me every week to talk about homesteading, homeschooling, and growth with a homestead education. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Homestead Education Podcast. As many of you know, one of my favorite things to do on this show is to teach people the questions that they don't know to ask. And a lot of you know that my biggest love is food safety and food laws. So today I have Alexia Kulwiec from the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund to talk to us a little bit about who they are and what they do and how that relates to what I'm always talking to you guys about. So welcome.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be here. Um, my name is Alexia Kulwiec, and I am the executive director, I think, as you said, of Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. And we are a membership-based nonprofit organization for homesteaders. It's $75 a year. And what we do is provide legal representation, legal consultation to our members, and also try to work on policy matters to make things easier on homesteaders, food producers, and to help consumers obtain the foods of their choice. We find that a lot of food laws, as you've pointed out, you're a fan of and follow food law. A lot of them are not what I
I said
would
I teach
call.
about them.
Oh, okay. A lot of them are not what I would consider scale appropriate, right? So we
Yes.
represent a lot of regenerative farms that face a lot of legal challenges in production and sales of their products, but we also have a homestead membership and where homesteaders are faced with challenges and problems legally from their states, their counties, their townships, that sort of thing.
So you bring up a really good point there, and um, I love that you guys also do some, you didn't say lobbying, you used a different word.
I said policy, yeah.
Policy. Thank you. I love that you guys are really focusing on policy too, because I think that's the most frustrating thing as a small scale farmer.
Yeah.
I've been doing small scale farm consulting for almost a decade now.
Hmm.
And it is exhausting because the laws that are out there, like you said, they don't fit the scale.
Correct. Yeah.
And even though there's technically the laws to meet the scale, the quote white sheets that either the federal or
Mhm.
state governments that provide you are so vague and unintelligible that you don't know what to do with them half the time.
Right. Yeah.
And so for the average farmer or um, food producer or something that is trying to follow these white labels, what happens when they don't get them right?
Yeah. Well, they end up in legal troubles, right? And that's why we do the representation and consultation on the flip side. I'll just say, I mean, I can't agree more that our particularly at the federal level, but the state level as well, and county levels, where most food law really hits the homesteaders.
Hmm.
Um, but particularly at the federal level, our system is set up to govern food safety of these humongous corporate food producers, right? So
Hmm.
these CAFOs, these, 100-acre produce farms, not what folks are trying to do in their communities on a smaller scale. And so they become very burdensome to a smaller producer. You can't meet the same kind of expensive, say, facility requirements that a really large producer can. And so it's a real problem. And we have homesteaders will face issues, say, with county or state agencies, a notice of violation because they haven't satisfied some requirement that you couldn't understand and doesn't seem to even apply to a smaller farm. And then poof, you find out it does. And we'll try to sort of help resolve that with the county. We will sometimes have to provide legal counsel at an agency hearing to try to resolve it, but really just help those small producers through the process.
That I really appreciate that you guys do that because even as somebody who has worked in this field for years.
Yeah.
My husband says that I'm my own worst enemy on it because I will decide I want to sell something off of our farm, and I look it up, and the white sheets for our state were literally written on a Word document, and it's like somebody just wrote notes and published it. And I was like, I don't know what this means.
Yeah.
And so I found a document that like the state land grant college put out
Hmm.
10 years ago,
Right.
which we know a lot of stuff has changed in the last 10 years. And so it said that this particular part of it would be ran or governed through our county health department.
Right.
So I called the county health department and I said, hey, well, what it was is rendered beef lard or
Okay.
beef lard, pork lard.
Okay.
And there's a lot of farmers around here who
Hmm.
sell and they market it as home rendered pork lard, and they're selling it in like the farm markets and from their houses and
Sure.
that type of stuff. And I was like, everything about all of my training is screaming no right now.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I call the county health. Actually, I mean, my kids call the county health department because that's how I do it. But I mean, I don't have any problem calling it, but they're teenagers, so I think that it's a really great place for them to do it, especially when my daughter does most of our rendering.
Yeah. Oh, that's
And
interesting.
so she called them and he was like, well, walk me through your process. And so she walked him through her whole process. And he goes, I have no clue if you can do that at home or not. I'll have to get back to you.
Yeah.
So,
Not uncommon, unfortunately.
yeah. And so her and I chatted a little bit about it. And I said, did he say anything about whether or not our pork has to be USDA processed,
Hmm.
which I'm sure it did, you know? And does it need to, do we have to be a USDA plant to sell a meat product?
Right.
And so she's like, okay, so she's ready when he calls back. He calls back and he goes, well, you need to process it in a commercial kitchen. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. We have friends that
Hmm.
let us rent their commercial kitchen. And she goes, but does it need to be, our meat is from a USDA plant, but do we need to be USDA because it is a meat product? And he's like, I don't know. I'll have to call you back. And we never did hear back from him. And it's been like a year, which
Okay,
what
well, my interpretation of that then is no, you don't personally need to be USDA. If that meat is from a USDA facility and you're doing the processing in a commercial kitchen, you should be fine. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and so then I start, asking myself that is if it's a so does that just make it a cottage food? Can I only sell it to my neighbors or can I ship it because it's shelf stable? Like,
Right, right.
and I'm going into all these next steps and I realized that like my husband says that I'm my own worst enemy, but I'm like, man, there's so many other people out there that are coming into the, homesteading, regenerative farming fields,
Yeah.
and they may not even know what a cottage food law is, let alone
Right.
taking it all the way back to that USDA level. Because, like, if I want to process meat and, like, if even if I buy or get my primals from my USDA plant and say make bacon and sell
Hmm.
it, that's a processed product where I have to be a
Correct.
USDA facility.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but if I were to bring it home, make bacon, and sell it to somebody who's eating it right there, then I'm a restaurant.
I know you're dead on. I mean, it really gets crazy. And I would say, you might not need to be a USDA facility to make it into bacon, but you might need a food processing license of some kind, right? Like, so
Okay.
like to be a food manufacturing license to make life even more complicated, right?
Right?
So it's true. I mean, like a smaller producer and homesteader, um, the not only is the system set up to regulate the smaller folks, but you're right that your inspectors and your state employees are so used to working with these bigger producers,
Hmm.
that even when there are exceptions or things for smaller folks, they don't, they haven't been well defined. The inspectors don't know what the law is. I find a lot of these, you call them sort of white pages or white papers or guidance documents, often exaggerate the authority of the agency. Like they'll do what you want, but it's beyond what the law itself or the regulations say. So I find that these agencies then overstep and are trying to make it even harder.
Hmm.
And one inspector to another will interpret it differently. Yeah, it's a crazy area.
Yeah, and even when I worked in food plants, I mean, I worked in a large food plant, And I
Hmm.
had, it wasn't a USDA inspector, it was for a GMP inspection, the
Okay.
for those listening, the good manufacturing procedures. And you can get third-party audits on your stuff. And I was showing him our pest mitigation,
Hmm.
and he's like, "Yeah, that's all great." He's like, "But a six pack of beer and a BB gun does the same thing." I was like,
My God, seriously?
we were very rural facility, but still a very large facility. And he
Wow.
like winks at me, and I'm like, "Well, I won't write that into our procedures, but
Yeah, but
that
thanks
sounds
for
like
the
a,"
info.
I was like,
Yeah.
"That sounds like a great evening activity."
My God. Wow. If I shared that with any of the other enforcement agencies I work with on a regular basis, um, they'd want to know immediately who I was talking about. And I'm not going to share that.
It's one of those ones where we would build a rapport, but I just had to laugh
Hmm.
about it because I had other inspectors come in that you couldn't
Yeah.
even joke with them. So,
No. Yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah.
like I couldn't even joke that, we were looking at, it was a US or a organic inspector, and we're going through paperwork, and I had made some just little joke about something about the filing cabinet, like everything
Oh.
getting messed up, and she just like glared at me and went back to what she was doing, and I was like, "My bad, I won't say
Great.
that
Yeah.
again."
Yeah. That's terrible. Yeah. It's, Um, and it's unfortunate because food safety is important, but we do need scale appropriate items. And then when you compare what the smaller producer goes through to some of the super unhealthy ultra processed foods that are deemed safe, it's just mind boggling, right?
Yeah. Like, it does blow my mind that I can't like walk out to my chicken coop, grab an egg, stick it in a box, and sell it to somebody without some sort of regulation. When,
Depending on where you are, you might be able to, but I hear you. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Mhm.
think here we're in Idaho, so we have like the
Okay.
best laws.
Yeah. Idaho's
But I
great.
still think, still technically I'm supposed to write on there, like
Oh,
our name, the name of our farm, that they're
yeah. Yeah.
ungraded, that type of thing. So there's still a regulation with it. It's just
Sure.
not.
You don't have to
Um,
be licensed, but there's a regulation. Yeah.
yeah. And, that's just, as a farmer, those are a lot of extra steps that cost a lot of extra money sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I
Yeah,
either have to sit
absolutely.
there and write on every single carton that we sell, or I have to buy labels, print labels, stick the labels to the
Mm-hmm.
cartons, and they don't stick.
Yeah. And then you'll get a notice of violation because it didn't have your stuff on it. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, I don't know. That carton said Safeway. I think they got those at Safeway.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily we've never had any type of violation. But
Good.
I hear about it a lot, and what really frustrates me is as homesteaders, I deal with a lot of the homestead people. I deal with small scale
Mm-hmm.
regenerative farmers a lot. And they're like, well, yeah, we really wish that we could sell pastured poultry, but there's not a USDA plant in our state, so there's nothing we can do. And I'm like, no, there is things you can
Yeah.
do, but they aren't like advertising that.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can do poultry processing as long as you're under 10, 20,000 birds,
Yep.
and do it yourself. You don't need that USDA plant. Now, the thing
Hmm.
is, plenty of producers don't want to be processors, right? They don't necessarily want to have to do that work, but for those that can, there are options, but you're right, they're not advertised. And working, you said calling your agency for assistance can be frustrating, and even just finding the rules if you're trying to like go on the agency website, um, you're not going to find that. Like if you know what you're talking about, you will find the poultry exemptions. But if you're just like looking around, you're not going to see that. Yeah.
You're definitely not. So, kind of give me a rundown of, say, what it would look like if, a new or even seasoned homesteader were to, let's go back to the lard. Just if they, oh,
Hmm.
I'm going to start rendering my own lard and selling it, but they weren't doing it right. Like what would end up happening with something like that? Hey guys, I know that we are always looking for ways to connect our homeschool kids with our communities and find things to do when we're out and about. Plus, it is so important to be connecting with like-minded families and those that have the same interests that we do. That's why I'm so excited to announce the new app that just launched. Basecamp Ed is a community-based platform for parents to find like-minded families and dedicated teachers in their area. Whether you homeschool your children, are curious about it, or simply want to build a community of extracurricular activities, Basecamp Ed has you covered. Connect with local parents to create co-ops, form groups for your children's interests, and use the calendar to schedule events with ease. Teachers and coaches can also create profiles to list their credentials for parents to find a way to supplement subjects and activities. Homeschooling was never meant to be done alone. It takes a village. Build it with Basecamp Ed. Take advantage of this free resource and download it today. You can also follow them on Instagram and Facebook at Basecamp Ed app for the latest updates. And you can get the link to that in the show notes for this episode.
Yeah, I mean, most likely, most often, if your state agency and in your example, I believe it was your county health agency,
Hmm.
um, hears about it, they're likely to show up and start asking questions. And a lot of times they're not even clear that they're engaged in an investigation, which is, another issue that I have a problem with. But in any case, they will likely investigate it, and if they understand that you're actually doing this without the commercial kitchen license, they will issue a notice of violation typically, with a cease and desist telling you that you have to stop, and potentially with some kind of a fine or penalty to be paid back to the county, typically. And a lot of times those are simply issued, and there will be the opportunity to appeal that notice of violation. If somebody reads it carefully and follows the timelines involved, they can appeal that. But it's a little bit, to me, it's frustrating because a lot of legal matters, you have to first find that the person was in violation. You have the hearing before there's some kind of determination, right? But a lot of these smaller, lower level, I might call them civil violations, they just issue you the notice of violation and expect you to pay unless you appeal it, and try to set it aside. Now, if I'm working with someone, I might do the notice of appeal to protect someone's timelines, but then I'll just call the county and try to work something out, right? I'll just be like, well, what's the real problem here? So like in your example, what's the problem? How did I violate the law? I had no idea. I thought I could do this under cottage food. I'm just a homesteader, right? Like whatever. And
Hmm.
they'll say, and in that case, they would probably explain, well, meat is usually an exemption to, or exception rather, to cottage food laws. So for meat, any kind of a meat product, which I guess they would consider rendering meat to be a meat product, you're going to need that commercial kitchen license because you're processing food, that's not covered by the cottage food law. So somebody could say, okay, great, like going forward, and you'll find a solution, right? Um, but I will say, I see a lot of people, that's like when I'm working with someone, I see a lot of people that ignore it, or they ignore it several times. And then by the
Mm.
time they find out to call someone like us, which I know is hard, they may not know about it, they're in deeper trouble and it's harder to resolve, right? Or,
Yeah.
they don't realize that there might be a way to just work it out with the folks. And then, then they're just angry because they have to shut down the operation, and, um, don't try to find that resolution. So it is really important that folks, if they hear from someone, they pay attention, they take it seriously, and you can usually try to get it resolved. If folks are willing to
So,
get, sometimes it has to do with the proper permits and licenses and stuff, and some people really don't want to do that. And if you're not going to do that, then it could be a tougher thing to resolve, right?
yeah, and sometimes, it's as simple as you just have to follow their suggested list and it's get
Right,
garbage service and put a filter on your water, and then they
right,
come and sign you off and you're good to go.
right, right.
Other times, like for us, the building that we want to make a commercial kitchen, we don't have a septic connected to
Mm.
it. So I have to put a septic in. After that, it'll be easy, but a septic is
Yeah,
$10,000.
that's not easy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We do live in a really great community where we don't have a lot of building laws, and we have
Hmm.
friends that do the digging and that type of stuff, but that's not an option for everybody. And some
Right.
states and counties have exorbitant uh, building permit laws and things like that that
Yeah,
you start, and that's where you get into that scalability.
right.
Like, I just want to be able to sell my friends and neighbors some bacon,
Right,
or
right.
whatever it may be. And that was just how we saved a little extra money to pay for our feed
Hmm.
to raise a hog every year,
Hmm.
versus now that's just not an option anymore for them. Like it's
Right,
absolutely not worth it. But then there's, a large producer where it would be worth it. They say, okay, let's do it. Let's get the loan. Let's
right.
make the whole thing. But then there's those ones in the middle that just, they have to make that choice
Right.
and they don't have the option of scaling, or they may not have the option of scaling larger, but this has been a solid base for them for a long time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a lot of people don't necessarily want to quote scale up. Like you said,
Hmm.
right? They want a homestead, they're doing other things in life. They want to do some sales to cover those expenses, right? Or as just a little bit of extra income. Yeah, and so they don't even want to scale up and have to meet these requirements. And you touched on the building permits, and I'll just sort of throw in there another thing that I think homesteaders face a lot are the different zoning ordinances and zoning regulations, right? So how their land is zoned restricts
Hmm.
what they can do on your land. Um, we deal a lot with right to farm laws and noise ordinances and odor ordinances and that kind of thing. um, Particularly in these areas that are perhaps not quite urban, but not quite rural, right? How the
Hmm.
urban sprawl is taking over, and people are in areas that used to be pretty rural, and now you have neighbors that don't like hearing dogs bark or something, right? So it's tricky. Yeah.
It definitely is. Can you cover real quick what a right to farm law is? Because I was reading
Yeah.
about those recently, and I think a lot of people don't even realize that's a thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. I will preface my comments by saying that I don't like how they came into being. In other words, right to farm really started as a way for when operations started um, growing, right, and expanding what was maybe I don't know, 5,000 cow operation into a big CAFO. States started
Yeah, I was gonna say,
passing
wasn't it a
laws.
CAFO in South
Yeah.
Carolina or something that really
It
got
was, I
that?
don't
Yeah.
know the state, but it was definitely CAFOs. And so it was definitely, when it was passed to protect these large industrial farm operations, typically CAFOs, but they could be other things as well, concentrated animal feeding operations, just to be sure, um, to
Hmm.
let them operate and be free from allegations of a nuisance, right? So most states or counties have things like noise ordinances that include public or private nuisances that could be filed against somebody based on noise or odor, or trash sometimes, these kind of things that would be considered a public or private nuisance. And the right to farm laws were passed to protect these operations from those kind of allegations. So you can be this huge CAFO with horrific odors coming from it, and there's nothing that folks can do because of the right to farm law. Now, what I will say is we then can use that and take advantage of them, and it can be extraordinarily helpful to small folks as well. So what I mean by that is if you are engaged in farming practices, typically it's along the lines of as long as you're following accepted management practices on your farm, agricultural practices, and you are engaged in some commercial activity, in other words, there's some selling of product, then you too, even as a very small operation, are protected from these public and private nuisance actions. So when counties come in and say, for example, the fact that you use a livestock guard dog to protect your poultry is a nuisance because they bark in the middle of the night. I use this example because this one comes up all the time.
Oh,
And the
and my
neighbor,
Great Pyrenees
yeah.
barks all night long. That is,
They're
but I mean,
doing
he's
their
barking.
jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a lot of how Great Pyrenees do it. They're more sit back, and I'm just
Yep.
gonna sit here and sound alarm because, like,
Yeah.
we have a lot of coyotes in the area and stuff, so he'll just sit and bark. And that's how
Yeah.
he does it, and he only goes into aggressive mode if he needs to.
Right. Right. And so, but sometimes you'll have a homeowner make a complaint, like a neighbor makes a complaint, and then county will come out and want to investigate and issue a violation under the noise ordinance, and we can defeat that by pointing out that the state right to farm law protects the use of these dogs as an accepted agricultural management practices, right? So that's where it comes into play for us, and sometimes as well, like having, you know, certain, there's I've also seen like you can't have debris, you can't have stray, garbage, this kind of stuff. And then they consider your rain barrels and we had a case in Gary where wood chips were being used to regenerate the land, and they said that somehow that violated something, right? I don't even remember.
Oh,
Um,
goodness.
like the aesthetics, you weren't supposed to, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and so then you can rely
Really,
on the right to farm law there to try to get some help. Yeah.
I have to laugh on that one. We live next door to a maggot farm,
Mm,
which is,
a maggot farm.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
they raise maggots and they send them down to like California to
Hmm.
pollinate in the big greenhouses.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they ship them as like cold stable like pupae,
Ah, yep.
and
Hmm.
then they turn into the flies and they pollinate, and then after they pollinate, and rather than like bees pollinating and then bees dying, the
Hmm.
flies die and then they like vacuum them up and just use them as compost. It's a really great,
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah, it's a really great concept. They stink a lot,
Yeah.
but we're pig farmers, so I can't complain too much.
Right. Right.
But they raise the maggots on wood chips, but it
Hmm.
has to be a very fine wood chip. And
Mm.
so the guy buys it and he sifts it, and then he has this giant pile of wood chips always on his property. And the other day he was saying, "Man, I need to move all those wood chips. I don't know what I'm going to do with them because I need to like access this other area."
Mm.
And we're like, "Oh, like I mean, we're mud season and we have pigs. We'll totally take some wood chips."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Great, I'll have my guy run them up to you."
Yeah.
They brought a pile of wood chips that is taller than our barn.
Oh my
Like,
gosh. Wow.
I think he brought like 9 loads up with their big backhoe.
Whoa.
And
That's a
we're
lot.
sitting there watching it happen, and we're like, I don't know if I should be thankful or annoyed right now.
Well, at some point, I would say you would have had the right to go out there and be like, "That's enough."
Right. Well, and we're on 40 acres and it's fine. We will use all
Yeah.
of them, but just we weren't expecting that. And I am
Yeah.
you can see it from the highway and stuff, and I'm like, I couldn't imagine in North Idaho somebody being like, your wood chips are aesthetically displeasing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it's crazy. Like, you particularly in city limits, right? You have these things about what you can have on your lots. And that, if you're
Mhm.
a homesteader, you might want a hoop house and you can't have that, or you can't do front yard gardening or things that are just crazy.
Yeah, I
And we
worked
just
in
need to get with the times. Yeah.
real estate for a while. And even in our very rural area, if you lived in some there's a lot of people that bought up land here
Hmm.
25 years ago and then now they're turning them into like mini ranchettes.
Yeah.
And they're marketing them as ranchettes. Come live in the country and live the country life. But then you're only allowed to have like one head of livestock, which
Yeah.
for people who don't know, one head can be like one cow calf, or I think it's 3 sheep or 5 goats or something like that.
Hmm.
But it's like, how do you advertise for people to come live the country life? And then
And then,
literally aren't even allowed to do it.
right. Yeah, that's very problematic. And, and one thing that I will say is, you mentioned people may not be aware of what different rules and regulations in their area are. It can be very helpful to, well, A, obviously folks should find out, and then B, when they're unreasonable like that, take efforts in your city council, in your county township leadership to change some of these things. Can be really helpful for homesteaders to try to improve that kind of thing. But I agree with you, and I don't know about the kind of ranchettes you're talking about. um, but I do also really advise people to stay away from anything that's in a homeownership. What do you call it? HOA, the
HOA
home,
or
yeah,
what are the
homeowner
CC?
association. Is that
Yeah,
it?
homeowners associations and gosh, I can't think of it. It's like a CCC or something like that. It's attached to the land.
Oh, yeah, some kind of a restriction.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
CC&Rs.
yeah,
Covenants, something and restrictions.
right, covenant. Yes.
Yeah.
So those, I mean,
And
they're
you could buy 100 acres in the country and attached to the deed, whoever like sold it at
yeah,
some point might say, and I never want it to be farmed.
right. Yeah. Now some of those are not enforceable. I'm not going to really opine. So some of those restrictions are not,
Pretty much your
but
neighbors would have to complain or something, but yeah.
yeah. but there certainly are some that can be upheld, and certainly homeowners associations are allowed to have rules that are much stricter than your local regulation. And so then, somebody buys this fantastic piece of land, it happens to be in a homeowners, they didn't think about that. And, now they're being told what they can plant and not plant and where they can have a side building, and it's very, yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, it really is. So, you mentioned a little bit like how you guys step in, and that
Mhm.
was if they definitely had violated. If there's like, you know, somebody said, "Hey, I'm going to want to make sure I follow the rules," and they go to their county health, and their county health advises them, and then turns out they were just overstepping or something and that type of thing. Do you guys like that's probably something you guys really,
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm not entirely certain. What I will say is we absolutely like to get involved before people are in trouble.
yeah.
Right? So we do a lot of consults that are, can I do this? What do I need to do that? That kind of thing. And so if you're saying like that somebody needs a consultation before there's a
Mhm.
violation, absolutely. If they have contacted their county health department to learn something and then determine that the county health department is overstepping their bounds, then yeah, we can step in that situation and try to mediate, even if there's no say notice of violation, but be like, hey, you told this person that they need a commercial kitchen license. Have you seen the latest copy of the cottage food law? That something like that, right? That allows you to process certain foods in your home kitchen and sell them and try to fix the situation before there's a notice. Absolutely. We'll try to help with that
Okay.
kind of
Because
thing.
yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely we like for us, we live in a very rural area where our county health department, it's part of like a regional health department. I mean, they're
Yeah.
focused
Yeah.
more on WIC and making sure people are getting
Hmm.
their vaccines and those
Right.
types of things. They are very they don't pay a lot of attention to like what's going on with the
Sure.
cottage food laws and things like that. And that's kind of just their side. Even our
Yeah.
half of our commercial kitchens here are just somebody's cafe that's been running for a
Hmm.
hundred years out of a shed on the side of their house.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And so we run into the issues that they don't know how to help us at all.
Right.
So my next question would be if somebody is wanting to find out what their laws are,
Mhm.
how would you suggest they go about finding those?
Yeah. I mean, typically, um, well, first I'll say for our members, we will help folks do that. So I just want to make that
Mhm.
little
Oh,
plug.
nice.
But if somebody were looking, I mean, depending on what you're discussing, your township or your county typically has their um municipal code or township code of ordinances, that kind of thing, published online. And you can look through there to find information. Typically, your departments of agriculture will have decent guidance and information for small farms, for small producers that I think might apply for homesteading as well. Public departments of health, I don't know that they have the same kind of guidance geared towards a smaller producer. Like you said, I think there may be some, they're assigned to be the ones that would have to inspect and give you a commercial kitchen license, or they may be the ones that have to enforce some of these laws on public health. But for the most part, their focus is in agriculture. So a lot of times, even if your issue is local, I might start with a state Department of Agriculture that might at least have some helpful guidance in terms of things
Mhm.
like, the state rules for what you need if you're selling eggs, right? You'll find that at the state level, not your Department of Health won't even necessarily have that published. So Department of Agriculture, you had mentioned previously, I think your state extension program, many universities have state agricultural extension programs. Those folks tend to be helpful, but I find um, that sometimes not sometimes, it's kind of why we exist, but oftentimes we see state or local agencies um, really taking it upon themselves to require more than the statute or the regulation provides, and state extension programs pretty much will educate people as to what the agencies want. So it's going to be, in my view, kind of a conservative answer. In other words, you have to get this permit, you have to follow these rules. And if somebody comes to me, sometimes I'll find I don't agree with that. I don't see that in the law, for example. But I mean, those are typical ways to look. The Department of Ag, your local county, municipal code of ordinances, your state extension programs, other local universities sometimes have some decent information, that kind of thing.
Are you looking for new ways to advertise your business? I would like to invite you to advertise your business on the Homestead Education Podcast. Did you know that 60% of listeners will make a purchase after hearing an ad on a podcast? Why is this? Because personal connections and credibility from someone they truly trust will give you the best conversions. My podcast has been on the air for over 3 years now, and with an average of 5,000 downloads per episode and tons of long-term listeners, you're bound to have somebody who will find that credibility in me. All ad spots will be promoted on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and my weekly newsletter. I have podcast sponsorship spots available that are affordable for all business sizes. And all advertising revenue will be used towards my educational outreach in the form of travel costs, curriculum development, supplies, and the administration of such activities. Go to my show notes now or visit thehomesteadeducation.com/podcast dash sponsorship. I hope to hear from you soon. All right. I feel like, and I meant to look this up. I feel like when I went to your website previously, you guys have a few helpful things. I believe, was it raw
Mhm.
milk? You have one that's a
Yes. I will also say, oh, I think I have frozen myself. There I am. So we're in the process actually of improving some of our resources. So I will say that. But what I will say is, yes, if you go to our website, farmtoconsumer.org, um, we have some public resources, some of which are set up by maps. So for
Mhm.
maps, we have cottage food laws, state meat processing issues, raw milk issues, and poultry processing. And so both meat and poultry start at the federal level, but then there are some things that states get involved in, and we'll provide some of that information. Um, and yeah, we have those four topics. We have maps where you can scroll down and read more details on a specific state about whether something is legal or how something is legal in those four categories.
Yeah, because I know it's definitely helped me a couple of times when I'm doing some of my consulting. I do nationwide
Sure.
consulting, and people will say, like, can I do,
Mm-hmm.
can I sell raw milk here on my farm? And
Right.
I've definitely shot straight to your guys' website
Yeah.
to get that answer in a quick, this is what I'm seeing. So let's go with that and we can look into it further from there because we'll do the consulting call and then afterwards I'll follow up with like extended research. But
Right.
that's always been a really good place for me to
Good.
go because I feel like you have it broke down so nice.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's true that the challenge here is that so much of what regulates local and smaller food production is at the state and county level.
Hmm.
So if you're doing national consulting, same with us, it's complicated, right? I don't have people from all 50 states on staff.
Right.
So
No.
yeah, it does
A
get
lot of my
complicated.
consulting is more how to just, make money off your business and
Sure.
some of those
Yeah,
side hustles and stuff. But I always want to advise them on what the
of
laws are
course.
so I don't get them all excited that, yes,
Yeah,
you can sell milk from your sheep that you're also shearing, like, and then they
right.
can't.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, for our members, we will look into it. I would say the maps include those four topics, frankly, because those are the ones that folks I think most easily get into trouble with. Raw
Hmm.
milk, poultry, meat, but we do a lot with produce laws and with zoning laws and all kinds of things, but and could get more detailed if somebody needs it. But yeah, those tend to be sort of your go-to problem areas that we initially have people
Right.
calling
Well,
us
and
about.
those are the ones that really fall under those exemptions that get so confusing. And, for the
Hmm.
listeners, it's meat, milk, and is eggs federal too?
There's a federal egg law that says under 3,000, you don't need any kind of permit or license,
Okay.
but
So
states can make it more stringent.
So yeah, meat, milk, and eggs fall under FICIS, which is the Food Safety Inspection Act
Hmm.
stuff. And that's all federal. And then they have exemptions like the, 3,000 egg or 10,000 bird exemption, or that you can, sell meat through your uh state inspected plant as long as you're not breaking it down into retail cuts. And I mean, there's all these like
Right.
little exemptions that's where it gets so gray and so murky that
Hmm.
it's hard to, you look up the law and it says, no, you can't sell meat out of your garage, you know? And I go, I absolutely sell meat out of my garage.
Well, hopefully it's in a freezer, right?
Well, yeah. And it's
Um,
actually not my garage, it's a shop on my property that, we have a little store
yeah.
in and we have freezers and fridges in there. We have
Hmm.
our milk and eggs and
Yeah.
we sell a
Yeah.
lot of pork and lamb. But yeah, I mean, if you get down to it, yeah, I'm selling meat out of my garage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm doing it 100% by the book.
Right.
And
Yeah. And sometimes
that's what a
you
lot of
need some kind
people,
of extra license for that and some just to like they'll literally inspect your freezer. Okay. Yep. Still cold. Um, but
right? Well, for our own personal in our state, we don't have to have, there's not an extra law for
yeah.
that. I have
Yeah, that's
to,
good.
once it leaves their facility, it's under my thing to say that it maintained a certain temperature from
Sure.
that point on.
That's your
So what we do
responsibility.
is, in the winter time here, we literally just load all the boxes up in the truck and come home because it's,
Yeah.
-30 here. But in the summer, I just make sure we have a freezer we stick in our trailer and run
Sure.
a generator and get
Yeah.
it home. And then I have those they're thermometers that go in my freezers and they're
Hmm.
connected to my phones. So I know if I lose a
Oh,
freezer, because I've lost way too many freezers and I'm over it. We lost
wow.
a freezer with 50 meat birds for our own
Oh
consumption last
no.
year, and
Oh
it was
no.
devastating. And I don't want to eat my own retail meat because that's our income. So
Right.
we literally ate an old sow for like 6 months. It was terrible.
Oh, that sounds horrible. Yeah.
I mean, we don't mind the old sow. We make a lot of sausage and that type of stuff, but it really
Sure.
it got boring after a
I'm
while.
sure it did. Yeah.
And we hadn't had a beef in 2 years because we decided to let the cow go dry for a year, so we didn't have any calves to butcher. And that fall, we decided like we're not going to hunt this fall because we really want to focus on all of the harvesting on our property and get it all in the freezers. And then
Sure.
lost
Oh,
a
that's
freezer with all of our poultry for the year. So I mean,
yeah.
it was devastation. I was like, I'm done. But
I'm so
back to the
sorry to
food
hear that.
safety part of
Yeah.
that is I keep those in my freezers now, and they will send me an alert if my freezers go down, but they also keep a constant log that I can download of my temperatures.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It
Yeah.
really is because then if I do have somebody, I've never had it happen and I rarely hear of it, but working in big food, I know exactly what they're going to go for first.
Hmm.
And can you prove to me that your freezer stayed a good temperature that whole
That
time?
whole time.
And I remember, before we had that type of technology, even 15 years ago, that I literally was constantly on workers' butts because I was the quality assurance really annoying lady in the plants, being like, you need to walk into that freezer and sign off on the log every hour.
Hmm.
And there
Make sure you
literally,
can
we had
prove
to
it the
have
whole time.
somebody put
Yeah.
eyes on those thermometers, like sometimes every hour, and then they'd have to like lock it down at night and in the morning check it first thing. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was a lot. And so that was something that I was like, if we're gonna have like five freezers running and a milk cooler, like I need those numbers that I don't ever look at them. As long as I'm not getting an alert, I'm happy. But
Right.
if anything were to ever happen, I can like download it like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I will just say that because I think you have listeners that are across the country, not just in Idaho, but
Hmm.
in a lot of locations, even if your meat is processed at a USDA facility, you may still need either some kind of a meat storage license or permit, to make sure that you have it at the right temperatures, or even a meat transportation license so that you literally need some sort of license to drive it from the USDA facility back to your own freezer. I'm glad
Hmm.
Idaho doesn't have it. Some states do, and it's folks should know that. I think that people fall into the false security that if it was USDA, then they're totally fine. And I
Hmm.
just wanted to mention that in some places, yes, you are. And in some places, no, you're not. And it's something to look into.
Yeah, and so if there's a license involved, they probably are going to require some sort of freezer inspection. Ours was
Hmm.
by choice, both because we've lost money and then hey, it's
Yeah.
just an extra, I know what they're going to look for, so let's
Yeah.
um because
That's
I
great
worked
advice.
yeah, I worked in a like a raw food facility. It was nuts, but
Mm,
a raw food facility during the time that there was all the deaths from the listeria outbreak with
mm,
cantaloupe.
hmm.
And being a food safety specialist in that time was very scary because when they came in and found that there was criminal charges involved,
Oh,
it
wow.
literally
Yeah.
went like, owner, operations manager, quality assurance manager. And I was like, I think it always like
Yeah.
it'll stick with me for life,
Stressful,
I think.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
My kids run our raw dairy and I'm like constantly like, wash your hands or I'm going to jail. So
Yeah, I mean, raw dairy can be so good for you and it's so wonderful, but you really do have to do it right. Um, Absolutely.
I made my kids all take the Raw Milk Institute course and get Serve Safe certified.
Wonderful. That makes perfect
Just for that,
sense.
even though like Serve Safe, they aren't working in a kitchen or something, but I figured
Sure.
that was, it's fairly inexpensive. It's like $30 or something like that. And that you can do it online. And it gave my kids an opportunity to learn those skills.
Right.
We're homeschoolers too, so we're always looking for new ways of
Right.
teaching the kids something. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
so I mean, we are kind of getting to the end of our time,
Hmm.
so there's a couple of questions I want to make sure we hit on. One, that $75 a year, does that cover if you guys have to like step in and help too?
Yeah. So, $75 a year is our homesteader level. So we will
Hmm.
do legal consultations for that. We will, if there's an agency, um, action like a hearing, and the issue involved falls directly within our mission, then we will provide counsel at that agency hearing. And I'll just say that within our mission, we're talking about the ability to produce and sell food from your land, or as a consumer to consume the food of your choice. So we're very focused on food production and sales to the community and sales to the public, as opposed to say um, forming your LLC or some kind of a land construction permits or something like that. So we're very focused on food production and how government overreach creates challenges to food production and sales. But yeah, if it's right within our mission, then we'll provide them consultation, we'll provide them representation at a hearing level. We are even known to at times litigate in court on behalf of homesteaders as well as on behalf of a small farm. We don't guarantee that or promise that. That's going to depend on sort of whether that has like a broader ramification, or something that we care about that might impact others in addition to the one individual. um, but we will provide the consultation and representation at earlier stages for everyone. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you also mentioned that you guys handle like regenerative farmers. Does that also
Mhm.
just include small, like large, small scale farmers? Like I call them commercial homesteads. That's kind of my like
Okay.
thing that I was like, I don't feel like we fit under any other thing.
Sure.
I'm a
Yeah.
homestead because we feed our family completely off of our homestead, but I'm also I raise 350 hogs a year on
Yeah.
pasture.
Okay.
But I'm not a
So I would,
regenerative. I guess I'm
yeah.
a regenerative farmer, but I don't.
Yeah, our organization would consider that to be at the farmer level, which
Okay.
when I talk about our farmer level is $125 a year. So it's still very much geared towards representing smaller regenerative farms. Our homestead membership really is more geared towards homesteaders that are raising food for their own families, right? So when they run into zoning problems because they're trying
Hmm.
to homestead on their property, they're told they can have one livestock head or what have you, right? That kind of thing, as opposed to commercial sales. When you're engaged in commercial sales, we'd really consider you to be at a ranch or farm membership level,
Which is
um,
still an incredibly reasonable price.
which is still incredibly reasonable, I think. Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, we do, about half of our revenue is from our dues and or our membership dues, and the other half is from fundraising efforts because, you know, what goes along with a small regenerative farm is not necessarily a huge income, right? So we want to be supportive of that
Yeah.
and do what we can. Yeah.
It definitely there's years when it just covers the feed, and
Mm,
there's and that's for us.
yeah,
We're a family of six. If we can cover all of our feed and
yeah,
still have full freezers all year long and be able to trade with our neighbors for other things we need and stuff, that's okay.
sure. Yeah,
And
that's
then
wonderful. And good
there's years,
quality, right? Yeah.
right? And then there's years where, like we don't lose any fair piglets because they're all born in January and they die from the cold.
Mm,
So we don't lose any fair piglets and stuff, and I can start our year off like really strong and be able to feed out more pigs for the year. And I'm like, wow, like we're able to afford a new UTV this year or something.
mm-hmm. Great. Yeah,
So it's, farming is farming is what farming is.
right. It's difficult.
I
It
grew
is.
up on a ranch myself, so
Yeah.
there's always those challenges. So do you want to tell everybody like where they can find you guys
Yeah.
and
Sure, I would love to do that. So like I say, the easiest place to find us if your folks are online is at farmtoconsumer.org. We have some resources there. I would definitely advise anybody if you go on our website to do the subscribe now, and you will get onto our email alerts and emails. We're very careful. We do not inundate people, but I will say if you look at our website, we do action alerts on a regular basis for policy that's being proposed. So either supporting, say, raw milk being, legalized, or being in opposition to some new legislation. And we contact people by state typically for those things, unless obviously you're at the federal level. And
And
then
a little
we
advice
also,
from me on that one.
uh-huh,
Once you subscribe to them, and this goes for anybody who you feel like you really want to know their stuff, platforms like Google automatically put that into a promotions folder and you don't see it in your regular inbox.
yeah, and I've only figured this out just recently. So I guess we need to do something to tell folks they need to mark us. How do you put it into like your
Well,
regular?
my business coach suggested I ask everybody to do this, and it always feels a little spammy to me in general.
Mm-hmm.
When they sign up for your email, one of the first emails you send them suggests to them that they either like add you to their address,
Mm,
or if it goes into promotions, you can go in there and say like not promotional or something. Each of those
sure.
platforms are a little different, but or you can even do a small little like figure out how to do it yourself and do a small little video clip or something with it.
That's really helpful. And we are improving some communications as we speak. So I
But
will take that under advisement. Yeah.
I feel like something like this, would want to know those laws regularly and as they're coming up. And I even myself this morning, I was looking for our email interaction for the
Mhm.
meeting and I typed it in and all these emails popped up and I was like, I haven't seen those. And I was
Oh
really
no.
bummed. And so
Yeah.
that's something that, whether it's you guys follow me or you're following a new place
Hmm.
like this, make sure you do that for those people that you really want to see what they have to offer.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's very good
Yeah.
information. I just want to add quickly, folks
Mhm.
can also just telephone us, of course, if they want.
Oh, yeah.
But doing the contact and the email, we do have an info at, farmtoconsumer.org if people like that. You can call us at 703-208-3276.
And I'll
3276 spells farm. Um, but yeah, the info at farmtoconsumer.org or just going on our website and using the contact us always works really well as well.
That's great. I'll be sure to put that because I do know that we have a lot of people that don't use
Yeah,
the internet in the same ways. So,
I understand. We have a lot of members who don't, so it's important to
mhm.
get that out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, man, thank you so much for coming on today. I feel like this is really going to help a lot of people who are trying to branch out or may have not even known that they could branch out.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and would you just tell everybody what keep growing means to you?
Keep growing means to me.
Yep, it's my favorite question for everybody.
Oh, well, I would take that as keep growing real healthy local food and caring for your families and your communities.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for your time. And
Yeah, thanks for having
everybody
me.
go check them out and see what they can do to help you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today at the Homestead Education, and I hope that I have given you something to think about this week. To help others find me, please comment and leave a review on your favorite podcast player. You can also follow me on Facebook at The Homestead Education and Instagram at Homestead_education. Do you have questions that you would like answered or just want to say hi? Please email me at hello@thehomesteadeducation.com. Until next time, keep growing!